So it is the beginning of a week, a Monday in the Transformer world. We might as well call it a Marauder Monday or a Slaughter's Marauders Monday, because we have a piece of news today that, while it is Transformer related, is also stemming from the G.I. Joe world. Now, 2 weeks ago, we talked about a pair of listings that popped up online of a Tra-Gen Trooper 3 and 4. Now, it was reported that the Trooper 4 was going to be a G.I. Joe crossover with the Thunder machine that transforms into Soundwave and came with the G.I. Joe Cobra Dreadnoks characters of Zartan, Zarana, and a G1 Ravage to just roll it all off. But the question was, that's Trooper 4. What is Trooper 3 then that we lightly discussed just a couple weeks ago? And it seems that information has surfaced today. And what's interesting about it is the source that it comes from. So this, first of all, the original source was from the Full Force crew. They talked about it on their Facebook page, and their source was from the man himself, Sergeant Slaughter. Now, for people who aren't familiar, Sergeant Slaughter was a wrestler back in the day, very famous, crossed over into different kinds of multimedia, but more specifically the G.I. Joe brand. He's a real person in real life. Really cool person. I've met him twice at conventions. And the thing with Sergeant Slaughter is he's always had a very kind of dubious history when it came to the licensing of his name and property. And for the longest time, it was kind of in limbo because he was this WWF character and property, but then he had a G.I. Joe contract, so that's Hasbro, but the WWF was doing their figurines and everything with LJN at the time, and then years later, the WWF would do stuff with Hasbro. It's a crazy history of back and forth that literally spans 3 decades, like no joke. And in the past, couple of years, it's been all over the place. He did some stuff with Valaverse. He did some stuff with Mattel through the WWE now. And all of that now kind of leads to him signing back home, where in April of 2022, he signed a multi-year contract with Hasbro to use his likeness for future product. Of course, later that month in April, we got the announcement of the Sergeant Slaughter's G.I. Joe classified 6-inch figure, and much of the G.I. Joe community was happy to hear that. So just kind of wanted to put that foundation for it. But the reason why I bring that up is because Sergeant Slaughter in the past has been known for, doing interviews and kind of teasing or accidentally revealing stuff way ahead of schedule of stuff that he's penned or contracts that he's signed. And just like how we learned a little earlier before the official announcement about the classified Sergeant Slaughter figure through Hasbro, through a recent convention interview, he kind of accidentally mentioned a Transformers G.I. Joe crossover involving Sergeant Slaughter. So, what do we got here? So apparently the Tra-Gen Trooper 3 is going to be a G.I. Joe Transformers crossover with the Triple T, which is Sergeant Slaughter's vehicle back in the day in 1986, along with a Sergeant Slaughter figure. Now, how is this going to go about? Well, just to remind people again, the Hiss Tank was the Trooper 1 was Hiss Tank Megatron with Baroness. Trooper 2 was the Ostriker with Bumblebee with the Stalker, aka Lorenzo. And now we just talked about 2 weeks ago, the Trooper 4 was the Thunder Machine Soundwave with Zartan, Zarana, and G1 Ravage. And now this Trooper 3 is potentially going to be the Triple T with Sergeant Slaughter O-ring figure. Who is it going to transform into? Which character? Well, the Full Force guys gave some good suggestions, and I kind of agree with them. It's definitely, you have Sergeant Slaughter, the drill sergeant character. So they suggested either Ironhide or Cup. I lean more on Cup. I think it would be much more cooler if it was Cup, just because Cup has that more drill sergeant kind of thing to him. But I think Ironhide might end up getting chosen just because he falls more into that mainstream kind of thing that Hasbro would probably want to go with a crossover brand like that. But that's just my take. I would love to be wrong and for it to be Cup. But that's it's pretty cool otherwise. And again, for people who aren't familiar with the Triple T, like that was a pretty important vehicle in GI Joe from a collectability standpoint, because within GI Joe, Sergeant Slaughter originally as an action figure was released in 1985 as a Mailway exclusive, and was probably difficult to get for a lot of kids, especially back then in a pre-internet era. And obviously that figure later on would be more easily accessible in 1988 and 1989. But prior to that, in 1985, that was the only way to get it. And then in 1986, the Triple T came out, and Sergeant Slaughter was included with the Triple T. It was a different version. It was version 2 with the black tank top. So that's kind of the Sergeant Slaughter that most kids had when they were growing up. If they got a Sergeant Slaughter figure, they got it through the Triple T. So I imagine that if we get this crossover thing, they'll probably include the O-ring Sergeant Slaughter figure version 2 that came with the original Triple T, the black tank top version. So that's the way I see it, but that's pretty cool otherwise, though. I really dig it. Sergeant Slaughter is a really cool character, and the fact that Hasbro signed a multi-year contract with the actual person and already put out one figure, I'm pretty sure they're planning to put out as much as they can. If they're going to sign a contract with a guy, they're not putting out one item. They're going to be putting out a lot of items, just like how Mattel prior to that, they made sure to make as many Sergeant Slaughter figures as possible before that contract expired with them with the WWE stuff, where they did like crossover stuff with the He-Man stuff. They did even his Iraqi sympathizer Sergeant Slaughter. They did like every version possible before that contract finished. So now it's Hasbro's turn. Now they're up at bat, and they're going to be doing obviously as much as they can with it. And a crossover sounds pretty cool. And in all honesty, I think that it's a really smart move because it targets many different audiences. You get the G.I. Joe collectors, you get the Transformer collectors, but you also get the hardcore wrestling guys that are also part of that action figure aisle and are toy collectors. So it's something that I'm pretty sure will, dare I say, will probably be the best selling of the 4 that we've pretty much talked about thus far. And, it's going to probably come with either, again, Cup or Ironhide as the transformable Triple T character, but whoever it'll be is kind of not too important, because at the end of the day, it's going to be more about just the branding of it and how it's going to attack 3 different markets and make them interested in picking this up. But either way, I think it's cool. I dig it. Sergeant Slaughter's cool. And now we have pretty much 4 now of this crossover thing. It's quite the initiative by Hasbro to really do as much as they can with this G.I. Joe crossover thing. Hit or miss if people enjoy it or not. That's a whole other conversation if they like the quality of the items or the transformations. But so far, it looks like they're really standing behind this with now 4 releases that are scheduled in total. So let me know what you think. I still think it's pretty cool, personally. I'm going to wait for Dusty one day. One day we're going to get Dusty. We're going to get Dusty with a crossover. Obviously, it's going to have to be like someone like Sandstorm. I think that would just make sense. It's funny because Dusty's version 3 Dusty came with a coyote that was named Sandstorm, typical Hasbro, keeping all the trademarks within the umbrella. But, maybe we'll get a Dusty with Sandstorm one day. Sandstorm the Triple Changer, and I don't know, it'll be a dune buggy or something. I don't know, it'd be something cool. That would just be, Proto Man making up his own ideas that would obviously sell terribly and would not work out well in the end. But it would be pretty cool to get a Dusty with Sandstorm, G.I. Joe crossover. But who would you like to see? And do you dig this Sergeant Slaughter one? Did you have the original Triple T back in the day? I didn't. I had a Sergeant Slaughter figure I got secondhand, but I never got the Triple T. But let me know what you think. Pretty hype stuff otherwise. And we'll have more news this week for sure, because it's going to be a busy week in the world of Transformers.